Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. For those that are new to my YouTube channel, subscribe immediately to see more content, and also leave a comment down below to suggest more amazing kinds of videos. Bring in part 4 of What If Spider-Man MCU entered Damnchi. Link down in description of the fan fiction This What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 7 Tangled in Shadows. As they traversed the 6th floor, the encounters with the giant one-eyed frog monsters posed little more than annoyances. Their attacks followed predictable patterns, easily evaded through the coordinated efforts of Belle and Peter. Despite Belle's speed and agility not quite measuring up to Peter's, their similar fighting styles had melded into a seamless synergy. This harmony enabled them to maneuver through the monster encounters with remarkable efficiency. As they walked down the narrow tunnel, Belle's confidence seemed to swell with each step. "You were right, these monsters are pretty weak," he remarked confidently to Peter. However, before Peter could respond, Jane's urgent voice echoed through the suit's speakers. "Warning! X-ray radiation increasing." The narrow tunnel suddenly fell into an ominous silence as Jane's warning hung in the air. Before they could react, the walls around them began to crumble, sending showers of debris cascading down. In the chaos that ensued, the darkness seemed to come alive, twisting and contorting into sinister humanoid shapes. With no way out, Peter and Belle stood back to back, their senses heightened as they prepared to confront this eerie and formidable new threat closing in around them. As the shadow monsters closed in, Peter instinctively deployed his web shooters, but his webs passed right through their shadowy bodies. His spider sense tingled with an instinctual warning, alerting him to the imminent danger. With lightning-fast reflexes, he dodged their slashing claws, narrowly avoiding their deadly strikes even in the confined space of the narrow tunnel. These shadow monsters were unlike anything they had faced before. Their dark, ethereal forms defied physical logic, rendering their attacks futile. Despite Peter and Belle's best efforts, their strikes passed through the creatures' incorporeal bodies without leaving a mark. The only tangible aspect seemed to be their razor-sharp claws, which they wielded with deadly precision. Belle fought desperately, his knife slashing through the air in a frantic attempt to divert the incoming attacks. Each clash sent sparks flying as the metal clashed against the monster's razor-sharp claws. But despite his efforts, Belle found himself overwhelmed by the relentless assault of the shadow monsters. As the creatures closed in, Belle felt the walls of the narrow tunnel closing in around him, his usual agility and speed useless in this confining space. His knife proved woefully inadequate for defense, barely able to keep up with the onslaught of the creatures' triple claws. With each strike, Belle felt the searing pain of their razor-sharp claws tearing through his flesh, leaving behind deep gouges. Peter's initial instinct was to leap up and cling to the ceiling, seeking a temporary respite from the relentless attacks of these monsters. However, the pained cries of Belle shattered his fleeting thought, grounding him in the grim reality of their dire situation. A surge of frustration and regret washed over Peter as he cursed the deceptive ease of the 6th floor, which had lulled them into a false sense of security, masking the true perils that awaited in its shadows. Chastising himself for his overconfidence and for straying too far into the depths of the dungeon without heeding the warnings of caution from Belle, Peter found regret gnawing at him. Now, trapped in this nightmarish scenario, he could only focus on protecting Belle and finding a way to survive against these formidable adversaries. Just as the shadow's monsters were closed in, Jane's voice pierced through the chaos once more, her warning cutting through the tension like a knife. "Warning! X-ray radiation increasing," she urgently alerted them. The walls of the dungeon started crumbling again, adding to the chaos and danger of their already dire situation. Goddess Freya reclined in her throne-like chair, a glass of wine in hand, as she faced the massive glass window of her abode on the uppermost floor of Babel. From this lofty perch, the city's buildings appeared diminutive, mere playthings for the gods. Her attention, however, was fixed on the magic mirror before her, which displayed the struggles of Belle and Peter in the depths of the dungeon. Until this moment, she had been deeply impressed by their remarkable speed, agility, and prowess, qualities that far outshone those of typical novice adventurers. However, they now faced a threat for which they were ill-prepared. The war shadows, notorious as newbie killers, had claimed the lives of many inexperienced adventurers, proving exceedingly difficult to defeat without magic. Freya shook her head in exasperation at the recklessness of Belle and Peter, who had ventured into the 6th floor without fully understanding the dangers that awaited them. Observing their futile attempts to combat the war shadows, she witnessed their attacks pass through the creatures' intangible forms. Belle sustained injuries while Peter evaded the creatures' assaults with uncanny agility. Suddenly, the walls began to crack, and more war shadows flooded into the already confined space. Freya recognized this as the typical nature of the dungeon, a place which bared its fangs at the adventurer's weakest moments. It seemed as though the dungeon itself could detect vulnerability, seizing the chance to strike. It wasn't just an underground labyrinth, it pulsated with life, harboring a malevolent intelligence eager to ensnare and consume any who dared to intrude upon its depths. With a furrowed brow, Freya contemplated the imminent demise of her newfound love interests. If they were to perish on the upper floors, it would signify that they were never worthy of her affections to begin with. Leaning forward with keen interest, Freya watched as Belle, despite his injuries and bleeding wounds, emitted a pure white light from his soul, growing increasingly luminous with each passing moment. Mesmerized by the brilliance of his soul shining like the sun amidst overwhelming adversity, she emitted a moan of pleasure. The sight stirred within her a primal desire to possess his soul, to witness the extent of its radiance when faced with insurmountable odds. In the midst of the chaos, as more shadow monsters poured in from the crumbling dungeon walls, Peter felt a surge of hopelessness wash over him. Trapped in the narrow tunnel, surrounded by the insubstantial forms of the shadow monsters, it seemed there was no escape. But then, a spark of realization ignited within him, a forgotten weapon at his disposal. Magic. Amidst the chaos of combat, Peter had forgotten about his newly acquired ability, instinctively resorting to his trusty web shooters. These tools had become an extension of himself, their use ingrained into his muscle memory through endless hours of web swinging in combat. Peter extended his hands into the familiar web shooting position and mentally commanded, Arachnostrand. Magic webs shot out from his arms, and unlike his synthetic webs, these ensnared the shadow monsters in their sticky embrace, successfully holding them at bay. He swiftly turned around, replicating the action to shield Belle from the onslaught of the monsters attacking him. His breath caught as he took in Belle's condition, bleeding, his entire upper body covered in gouges from the claw attacks, yet he stood determined. Seizing the opportunity, Belle retrieved a healing potion from his pouch and quickly consumed it. Peter watched in amazement as the wounds began to close before his eyes. Their brief respite was short-lived as the creatures, armed with their razor-sharp claws, began slashing at the magical bindings with ferocious determination. Peter asked urgently, "Jane, any suggestions?" Through his mask interface, Jane replied, "I am detecting higher levels of radiation emanating from these creatures' eyes. I estimate that their crystal cores are located there. Try attacking there." Without hesitation, Peter brandished his knife and swung it towards the slightly glowing eyes of the nearest monster. The blade struck true, shattering the crystals within, and the creature dissolved into shadows. "Belle, target their eyes," Peter shouted, relaying Jane's insight. As Peter continued to bind the monsters with his magic, he and Belle launched a coordinated assault, striking at the vulnerable spots revealed by Jane's analysis. Despite their efforts, the horde of shadow monsters seemed endless, and Peter began to feel the effects of his prolonged magic usage. A sense of drowsiness crept over him, reminding him of Hestia's warning about the dangers of mind down. Realizing the urgency of the situation, Peter turned to Belle. "We need to retreat, now." Together, they fought their way back through the narrow tunnel, with Peter using his remaining strength to web the monsters behind them while he and Belle pressed forward with renewed determination. However, Peter noticed that Belle's wounds had not fully healed, and his movements were becoming increasingly sluggish. With each spell cast, Peter felt his dizziness intensify, threatening to overwhelm him. Fearful of losing consciousness, he pushed himself to the limit, focusing on reaching safety. Finally, they broke free from the confines of the tunnel, and without hesitation, Peter scooped up Belle in a bridal carry and started running. As Peter sprinted, the cacophony of pursuing shadow monsters echoed behind him. Suddenly, his spider sense tingled, and he instinctively dodged, narrowly evading the lashing tongue of a frog monster. Glancing back, he spotted the creature lingering, its tongue still extended. Ignoring the distraction, Peter maintained his pace, his spider sense allowing him to dodge further attacks from the lurking frog monsters. Meanwhile, Belle weakly protested being carried in a bridal style, insisting that he was fine, but Peter silenced him with a firm hush. With determination, he reached a section of the dungeon with a lofty ceiling. Without hesitation, Peter propelled himself into the air, utilizing his web shooter to swing with one arm while securely holding onto Bell with the other. Their airborne escape provided them with a momentary advantage, allowing them to shake off the relentless pursuit of the monsters. Despite this temporary respite, Peter remained vigilant, maintaining their pace until he was certain they were out of harm's way. As they ascended back to the 5th floor of the dungeon, Peter gradually slowed down, finally coming to a stop. Peter gently lowered Bell to the ground, his concern deepening as he noticed the persistent bleeding from Bell's wounds. Without hesitation, he reached into his backpack, retrieving a healing potion to offer his companion aid. However, before Peter could administer the potion, Bell intercepted it from his hand with a determined expression. With practiced efficiency, Bell drank half of the potion and then poured the remaining contents directly onto his wounds. Peter watched in fascination as the magical elixir worked swiftly, closing the gashes with remarkable speed. Peter then retrieved a mind potion from his backpack. With a quick gulp, he consumed the potion, feeling its revitalizing effects wash over him, dispelling the drowsiness that had threatened to overwhelm his senses. Peter settled himself beside Bell, his expression weighted with remorse. "I'm sorry, Bell, I should have listened to you. I never meant to put you in danger like that." Bell waved off his apology with a faint smile. "Hey, don't worry about it, Peter. We made it out okay, right?" Peter chuckled softly. "Yeah, thankfully, but next time, I promise I'll pay more attention to your advice." Bell nodded in agreement, then shifted the conversation. "Anyway, let's call it a day. We've gathered more crystals than I ever have before." Peter nodded. "Sounds good. Let's head back." As they made their way to the guild after their refreshing shower at Babel Tower, Peter couldn't help but notice the sorry state of Bell's shirt. It hung off him in tatters, a stark reminder of their recent trials in the dungeon. Concern etched across his features, Peter gently remarked, "Bell, perhaps it's time for a new shirt before we step into the guild." Bell's gaze dropped to his torn attire, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "I agree," he confessed sheepishly. "But unfortunately, my wallet doesn't share the sentiment right now." Understanding Bell's predicament, Peter suggested, "Let's head back home first. You can change into something decent. Aina would give me an earful if she saw you in that state." Bell shuddered at the thought of his dungeon advisor finding out that he had gone down to the 6th floor and almost got killed again today, feeling a chill run down his spine. "Sounds like a plan," Bell agreed with a nod. "But you go ahead to the guild and handle the crystal exchange. I'll join you shortly after changing." Bell handed over his backpack full of dungeon drop items to Peter. Peter accepted it, recognizing the unspoken message behind Bell's gesture of trust and camaraderie. With their course of action decided, they parted ways, each heading towards their respective destinations. Peter entered the guild and made a beeline for the exchange counters, his integrated suit drawing curious glances from the adventurers mingling around the bustling space. Approaching an unoccupied counter, he swiftly emptied both his and Bell's bags of all the crystals and items into the exchange box. The clerk on the other end, a man with cat ears, deftly pulled in the drawer and began sorting through the items. As he watched the clerk meticulously examining each item, Peter couldn't help but doubt the accuracy of the process without the aid of computers. The thought nagged at him, how could he be certain that the valuation was fair? The possibility lingered that the clerk could be cheating him, or at least, making errors in the assessment. Perhaps he should ask Jane, to keep track of all the items and calculate their value to ensure they weren't cheated during the exchange. It was a practical solution to safeguard their earnings and prevent any potential discrepancies. "Can you please explain the valuations of various crystals and drop items?" he asked politely. The clerk, already engrossed in his task of evaluating his drops, replied gruffly, "All the valuations are listed by the guild. You can find them in the library." Peter waited patiently until the clerk finished evaluating his drops. "The total valuation comes to 21,000 valis," the clerk said gruffly. "How do you want it divided?" Peter pondered the clerk's question. They likely divided the collection according to the party members, but he couldn't help but wonder if Hestia should receive a share for familia expenses. "Divide it into 3 equal parts," he instructed. The clerk counted out the coins and placed 3 pouches in the exchange box. Peter thanked the rather rude clerk and made his way to the library. As he passed by, he noticed Aina eyeing him with a look of slight confusion, probably wondering where Bell was. He gave her a slight nod of acknowledgement before entering the library. The guild library exuded an aura of quiet wisdom and scholarly atmosphere. Tall bookshelves lined the walls, reaching up to the high ceiling adorned with intricate chandeliers. The shelves were filled to the brim with leather-bound tomes, scrolls, and ancient manuscripts, their spines bearing the weight of centuries of knowledge. Sunlight streamed in through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the polished wooden floor. The air was filled with the faint scent of parchment and ink, lending a sense of nostalgia to the space. At the center of the library stood a large oak table, surrounded by plush chairs inviting patrons to sit and delve into the depths of knowledge. In the corner of the room, a solitary figure sat behind a desk, poring over a stack of scrolls. The librarian, a fox lady with keen eyes and a serene demeanor, seemed to be bored, her attention wandering as Peter entered. The tranquil atmosphere of the library remained undisturbed, as it was currently empty save for the librarian and Peter. It occurred to Peter that perhaps the adventurers of this world weren't very literary and didn't frequent the library often. The fox lady looked up at Peter, her gaze lingering on his integrated suit with a hint of awe. "That's a nice armor," she remarked, her curiosity piqued. "How can I help you?" Peter inquired, "Could you provide me with the guild's rate list for exchanging monster crystals and drops? Additionally, do you have information on various monsters categorized by the dungeon floor they appear on? Lastly, I'd like to review the dungeon maps, if possible." The librarian blinked, a hint of surprise crossing her features before she nodded understandingly. "Most adventurers don't even think to come in here and ask for such basic information," she remarked, her tone carrying a touch of amusement. "You would think that more adventurers would come in here to access all the information the guild has so painstakingly put together. What is your name, young man?" Peter introduced himself with a polite smile, grateful for her assistance. She gestured towards a nearby shelf and pointed out the rate list, neatly organized for easy reference. With a gentle smile, she guided Peter to another section of the library, where she showed him where the maps and details of the monsters were kept, ensuring he had everything he needed for his research. Peter took the rate list for upper floor monsters and found a nearby table to sit. He put on his mask, activating it to communicate with Jane. Glancing at the librarian, he noticed her surprise at seeing him don the mask, but she didn't comment. Instead, she kept shooting curious glances at him, her intrigue evident in her expression. Peter observed that the price of the monsters' crystals increased with the difficulty of the monsters. "Jane, please scan this document," he requested. "Would you be able to calculate the net worth of the items I exchanged today?" Jane answered cheekily, "Of course, I am perfectly capable of performing such trivial tasks." Peter turned the pages of the rate list for Jane to scan them, his movements swift and efficient. The librarian observed with amusement as he flipped through the book at an impressive speed, unaware that Jane needed only a split second to scan the contents of a page. Jane relayed the analysis, stating, "I have analyzed the data. The proper valuation of the crystals and drop items handed over today is 23,215 valis. The clerk has paid you 2,215 valis less." Peter contemplated that he would always verify with Jane during exchanges to prevent from getting cheated again. However, he knew he needed to keep Jane a secret. He decided he would just have to pretend to be exceptionally skilled at math to explain his accuracy in valuations. As Peter flipped through the books about the monsters, he came across the entry for the shadow monsters they had faced, known as war shadows. According to the book, they were vulnerable to magic. Their only weak spot to physical attacks was their eyes, a detail they had already figured out during their encounter. The book recommended purchasing an enchanted weapon to fight them if the adventurer didn't possess offensive magic. This sparked Peter's curiosity about the enchanted weapons available in this world. He made a mental note to look into it further, intrigued by the potential advantages they could form. As he continued flipping through the books for Jane to scan, Peter heard Anna's voice echoing from the entrance hall of the guild. "You went down to the 6th floor." Her voice carried with unmistakable frustration, and Peter sighed inwardly, knowing Belle couldn't keep anything a secret. Moments later, Anna stormed into the library, dragging a fuming Belle alongside her. Spotting Peter, she seemed momentarily confused upon seeing him wearing a mask, but she quickly disregarded it and directed her anger at him with a shout. "You." Peter replied jokingly, pointing at himself, "Me." Anna shot him a death glare, the light reflecting off her glasses. Peter couldn't help but wonder if giving glares was her superpower. Anna shouted, "Mr. Parker, this is serious." Peter couldn't help but wonder, didn't they have a policy of keeping silence in the library in this universe? He noticed that the nice librarian was looking at the scene with amusement. Deciding to amuse her further, he replied, "You must have me confused with someone else, lady." Both Belle and the librarian snorted at his reply. Anna's glare seemed to intensify. Peter half expected her to suddenly start shooting laser beams from her eyes. Anna said angrily, "Mr. Parker, what were you thinking going into the 6th floor on your very first day in the dungeon? Adventurers with months of experience don't dare to venture there. You could have gotten yourself and Belle killed." Peter couldn't resist a cheeky comeback. "This isn't my first rodeo, sweetheart." Belle raised an eyebrow quizzically. Anna's glare intensified, her eyes practically shooting sparks. Peter couldn't help but notice the puzzled expressions on their faces, indicating they weren't quite catching his drift with the slang. With an exasperated sigh, Anna turned to Belle. "Belle, you almost got killed yesterday at the 5th floor. You should have learned your lesson from that incident. Remember, adventurers shouldn't go on." She stopped herself from repeating her favorite phrase mid-sentence and shot Peter a glare, as if she expected him to mock her about it again. Peter, meanwhile, contemplated whether he should add that Belle almost got killed today also, just to rile her up even more. After all, why waste a perfectly good opportunity to stir the pot? But he held his tongue for Belle's sake. After all, Belle wasn't immune to her death glares. Anna then turned her attention to Peter, her tone firm and admonishing. "Mr. Parker, as the elder, you should be the responsible one. Belle's recklessness is concerning enough without any further encouragement. Remember, actions have consequences. If you keep taking risks, you or those you care about may get hurt, or worse." Peter's playful demeanor vanished in an instant, his voice taking on a grave seriousness. "I understand that very well, Miss Tooley. People have suffered greatly as a result of my actions. My aunt, the woman who was more than a mother to me, died because of my choices. I've lost all my friends, my home, all consequences of my actions. So believe me when I say, I understand the weight of my decisions." Anna felt an urge to take a step back at the sheer intensity radiating from Peter. Belle's expression shifted to one of concern and empathy. The librarian observed the exchange solemnly, recognizing the gravity of the conversation. Even though Peter was wearing his mask, there could be no doubt that his expression must be deadly serious underneath. "I promise you, Miss Toole, I will protect Belle to the best of my abilities. I would rather die than allow any harm to befall him." Anna could feel the weight of Peter's words, his sincerity evident even behind the mask. She paused, considering his vow, and finally replied, "I trust you'll keep your word, Mr. Parker. But remember, protecting Belle also means guiding him away from unnecessary risks. The same goes for you, Belle." Belle observed the exchange with a mixture of concern and admiration. He knew he was in good hands with Peter, but the weight of their shared responsibilities was not lost on him. Anna added, her tone shifting to one of official business, "On a different note, since your familia has more than one member, you would need to register your familia's captain with the guild. The captain is responsible for maintaining communication and paying taxes to the guild. You have 1 week to do so." Belle instantly chimed in, suggesting, Peter should be the captain. Anna frowned disapprovingly at Belle's quick suggestion. "You should discuss this with your goddess first, Belle. Such decisions shouldn't be taken lightly. It will have an important impact on the future of the familia." With that, Anna bid farewell and left, leaving behind a lingering sense of gravity in the room. Peter couldn't help but muse that Anna definitely didn't trust him to become captain. Peter continued flipping through the pages at a rapid pace. Belle, intrigued, asked, "Wow, Peter, can you really read that fast?" Peter glanced at the librarian, who had finally lost interest in their conversation and was engrossed in a book. "I can't, but Jane can," he replied casually, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. Belle's eyes widened in astonishment. "Whoa, seriously, that's incredible," he exclaimed, impressed by the capabilities of Peter's spirit companion. After spending another hour scanning books, Peter finally decided to leave. He realized he needed to buy clothes and other necessities. Handing Belle his share of the earnings, Belle eagerly asked, "How much is it?" "It's 7,000, Peter replied, watching as Belle's eyes widened in amazement. "Wow, I've never made that much before," Belle exclaimed in disbelief. Peter nodded, adding, "Actually, we made 21,000. I kept a third of it to give to Hestia for familia expenses, if it's all right with you." Belle's astonishment only grew. "Wow, that's a lot," he remarked, processing the significant sum. And we did return early today. We can make so much more if we stay in the dungeon for the whole day. Peter smiled at Belle's enthusiasm, appreciating his eagerness to explore and earn more. Belle then confessed that he hadn't given Hestia any Valis until now, as all of it had been going towards maintaining equipment, buying potions, and paying off the debt to the guild. He wholeheartedly agreed that a third of their earnings should go to the goddess. Peter remarked, "I need to get some new clothes. And you should probably get a replacement for that shirt the dungeon devoured today." With a nod, Belle agreed, and they set off together for a shopping trip. Chapter 8 The Challenge. Tears welled in Hestia's eyes, shimmering like diamonds as she gingerly cradled the pouch in her hands, her fingers trembling with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. "Is this, for me?" Her voice wavered, barely above a whisper, as she glanced up at Peter and Belle, her gaze filled with a mixture of surprise and wonder. Peter and Belle stood before her, their expressions earnest and sincere. In unison, they nodded, confirming her silent question. "Yes, Hestia," Peter replied, his voice gentle yet firm. "It's a portion of what we've earned in the dungeon. We want you to have it. To cover the familia and your personal expenses. You don't need to work at the snack stand anymore. 7,000 Valis, a significant sum, offered freely and without hesitation." It was a gesture of profound generosity, one that touched Hestia to her very core. With trembling hands, she reached out, accepting the pouch as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Overwhelmed by emotion, Hestia went full-on human cannonball, launching herself at Peter like a pint-sized projectile. Despite the crash landing that followed, Peter's superhero-grade strength kept him from stumbling, turning the whole thing into an impromptu hug fest. He wrapped his arms around the mini-goddess, giving her a squeeze back, though he couldn't help but notice the, prominent presence of her assets. Talk about unexpected perks. After Hestia released him from her clingy grasp, she turned her teary-eyed attention to Belle, ready to spread the love. "Thank you," she whispered like a sentimental soap opera star, her voice dripping with emotion. "I've got the best children." With all the feels in the air, she pulled Belle into a bear hug, practically squishing the poor guy's face against her chest. Peter couldn't contain his laughter, watching Belle's face turn redder than a fire truck. Well, Peter thought, at least someone's getting a front row seat to the bosom bonanza. After wiping away her tears and composing herself, Hestia cleared her throat to speak. "I have to go out tonight," she announced casually. "We're setting up our stand at a dinner event." Peter's brow furrowed in concern. "You know, you really should quit that snack stand job. It's not befitting our familia's image." Hestia sighed softly, shaking her head. "I understand your point, Peter, but I still want to do my part." Peter's eyes softened with understanding. "I know, but there are better ways for you to contribute. With the Valis we're earning from our dungeon runs, we could rent a decent place. Once we're settled, you can focus on recruiting new members to help us grow." Hestia's gaze brightened with hope at the prospect. "Do you really think so, Peter?" "Absolutely," Peter affirmed with a reassuring smile. "We'll make it work, Hestia. Together." Well, I've got to go tonight anyway," Hestia announced, her tone casual yet purposeful. "But before I go, let me update your fauna, Belle." Belle complied, lying down on the bed with his back exposed. As Hestia began the update, her expression quickly changed from casual to stunned, her eyes widening in disbelief. Once the update was complete, she printed out his status on a sheet. Peter, sensing something unusual, approached to take a look, while Belle rose from the bed, took the sheet curiously. Belle Crenell, LV, 1, Strength, I-82, H-140, Endurance, I-13, H-121, Dexterity, I-96, H-152, Agility, H-172, G-250, Magic, I-0, Magic, opening square bracket closing square bracket, Skills, opening square bracket closing square bracket. "What?" Belle exclaimed, eyes widening as he scanned the numbers. "How many points is that?" he asked incredulously. Jane chimed in helpfully, "The total points increase in your stats is 300 points across all attributes." Hestia's heart skipped a beat as she processed the staggering increase in Belle's stats. Was it merely the result of his new skill, Lier's Freeze, or had something more profound transpired in the depths of the dungeon? Surely, such a dramatic improvement couldn't be attributed solely to a skill upgrade. Hestia inquired, "What exactly happened in the dungeon today?" Belle seemed to shrink back, his expression troubled. Peter stepped in, his tone serious. We ventured down to the 6th floor today. We encountered a bit of a problem with the war shadows. Hestia fixed her gaze on Peter, her intuition keen. I can tell when you're lying, Peter. Tell me exactly what happened. With a heavy sigh, Peter relented, recounting the perilous ordeal of being ensnared in the claustrophobic confines of the narrow tunnel, surrounded by the menacing war shadows, and their narrow escape. Hestia's heart sank as she listened to the tale, her concern deepening with each passing moment. Both of you need to be more careful, she implored, her voice trembling with emotion. I can't bear the thought of losing either of you. Inwardly, she began formulating a plan to ensure the safety of her exceptional children in the treacherous depths of the dungeon. She proceeded to update Peter's fauna next. Peter, brimming with curiosity, eagerly accepted the sheet from her hand. Peter Parker, LV, 1, Strength, I0, I3, Endurance, I0, Dexterity, I0, I4, Agility, I0, I6, Mind, I0, I22. Magic, Arachnostrand, no chant magic, shoot webs from hands, closing square bracket. Skills, spider powers, abilities akin to a spider's natural capabilities. Spider sense, can sense danger. Peter glanced down in disappointment, his brows furrowing at the modest increase in his stats compared to Belle's staggering boost of 300 points. Belle, too, appeared puzzled by the relatively small improvement. My stats grew a lot faster than this, he remarked, his confusion evident. Why did Peter have such a small increase in stats? Hestia cleared her throat, preparing to offer an explanation. The increase in fauna depends on the excelia gathered, she began. The quality of excelia, in turn, depends on how much the adventurer is challenged. Peter, you're already quite strong, so the monsters you faced didn't provide much of a challenge. However, your magic attribute, which was weaker, experienced significant growth. Peter contemplated the explanation, his mind drawing parallels between their adventures and the mechanics of the gaming world. So, excelia is basically like experience points, he thought to himself. Higher level players get less express from killing lower level monsters. He nodded to himself, recognizing the logic behind the system. All have to face stronger monsters to gain more excelia, he concluded. As he considered the implications, Peter realized another aspect. Since my magic is weaker, it'll improve more rapidly, just like in RPG systems where weaker stats are easier to level up. Hestia then left for work, leaving Belle and Peter to their own devices. Belle, eager to suggest dinner plans, proposed, how about we go to that place for dinner, the hostess of fertility. We did promise to visit that nice waitress. Peter sighed, shaking his head at Belle's suggestion. Firstly, she conned you, he pointed out. Secondly, we didn't commit to going there. And thirdly, the free food she gave us wasn't even that good. If you still want to go there, you're paying. All right, dinner's on me, Belle admitted reluctantly, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Hey, Belle, you really need to build up some resistance to pretty faces, Peter quipped with a wry smile. I mean, I hope you don't blow all the money you made today. It's your funeral, man. Belle looked at him with a puzzled expression. My funeral? He asked, clearly confused. Peter chuckled, realizing he'd dropped a bit of slang from his world. Ah, sorry, Belle. Where I come from, that's just a saying we use to mean, you're taking a risk, and, well, whatever happens next is on you. It's like saying, you're responsible for whatever happens. Just a friendly warning, you know. Belle nodded slowly, still trying to grasp the concept. Ah, got it, so, it's like, I better be careful with my money, or else I'll regret it later. Something like that, Peter replied with a grin, giving Belle a playful pat on the shoulder. Now, let's go, I'm starving, and the best part is, I don't have to pay for the meal. Belle's excitement was tinged with a hint of apprehension as he processed Peter's words. Sir's words also echoed in his mind, and make sure to order lots of food. It's the least you can do to properly thank me. How much would this dinner set him back? The mere thought sent a shiver down his spine. Before venturing out, they both paused to switch into more appropriate attire. Peter shed his integrated suit, opting instead for his new clothes. The absence of Jane felt peculiar, she had been his steadfast companion since he first arrived in Orario. However, Peter recognized the impracticality of wearing the suit constantly, especially for a casual dinner outing. As Peter and Belle crossed the threshold into the Hostess of Fertility, Peter found himself immediately captivated by the establishment's old-world charm. The ambiance was rich with nostalgia, accentuated by the soft glow of dim lighting that danced upon the worn wooden furniture. A tantalizing aroma of savory dishes filled the air, mingling harmoniously with the animated conversations of patrons. Surveying the scene, Peter couldn't help but notice the diverse array of staff bustling about the tavern. Among them were cat girls, an elf, and humans, each donned in the signature green-made uniform of the establishment. Despite their differing appearances, they all shared one common trait: they were all female, lending credence to the establishment's name. However, amidst the few staff members present, one stood out distinctly. Behind the bar, a formidable woman, towering in stature and muscular in build, commanded attention. Clad in a blue uniform that seemed almost too small for her broad frame, she exuded an aura of strength and authority that was impossible to ignore. Despite her imposing height, her body structure seemed reminiscent of a dwarf, adding to her intimidating presence. With arms crossed and a no-nonsense expression, she surveyed the room with a watchful eye, ensuring that order was maintained amidst the lively chaos of the tavern. She must be the owner, Peter mused. Sir approached them with a warm smile, her eyes bright with hospitality. Belle, Peter, welcome to the Hostess of Fertility, she greeted them cheerfully. Then, with a theatrical flair, she announced their arrival to the entire establishment. We've got 2 customers. Peter couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at Sir's enthusiastic proclamation. Do night bars really need to announce their customers like that? He wondered aloud, a hint of amusement in his voice. Sir chuckled at Peter's question, her laughter echoing through the bustling tavern. Well, it's more for the sake of the atmosphere than anything else, she explained with a playful twinkle in her eye. Besides, it's always nice to make our guests feel welcome from the moment they step through the door. Sir led them to the bar counter with a mischievous grin, announced loudly, now seating 2 adventurous souls. Peter couldn't help but chuckle at her playful demeanor, amused by the lively atmosphere of the Hostess of Fertility. Belle found himself directed to a seat right at the corner of the counter. It was positioned in such a way that if he leaned back, he'd touch the wall. Meanwhile, Peter was seated beside Belle, positioned at a right angle from him, with his back against the seating area. As he settled into his seat, Belle couldn't shake off the feeling of being under the boss's watchful gaze. He tried to maintain a stoic expression, but inwardly, he was feeling a bit overwhelmed by the attention. Suddenly, the female dwarf boss behind the counter made a surprising declaration. I heard that you are a big eater that would make us grieve. She exclaimed with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. This old lady would continuously serve you dishes, you can relax and continuously hand out your money. Belle's eyes widened in shock at the unexpected proclamation. What? He blurted out, feeling utterly bewildered. Turning to Sir for clarification, Belle was taken aback to find her avoiding eye contact, her gaze fixed on something across the room. When did I become a big eater? Belle demanded, feeling a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Sir's response was nothing more than a sheepish giggle, further fueling Belle's frustration. What's so funny? He exclaimed, feeling a sense of betrayal. Peter, sitting beside Belle, couldn't help but chuckle at the scene unfolding before him. Looks like you've earned quite the reputation, Belle, he remarked teasingly, earning an incredulous look from Belle. Belle shook his head in exasperation, realizing he was being teased by both Sir and Peter. I will not be fooled anymore, he declared dramatically, shooting Sir a playful glare. This person is a demon. Sir pretended not to hear Belle, suddenly finding a distant customer incredibly interesting. With an innocent smile, she floated away to their table. Belle's heart sank as he perused the menu, his eyes widening at the sight of the prices. Usually, he was used to spending around 50 valis for dinner, but here, the cheapest dish was a whopping 300 valis. His heart shrank even further when Peter began rattling off a list of items to order: spaghetti, meatballs, gravy, fruit juice, while casually glancing at his menu. In a state of panic, Belle quickly settled on the cheapest option, a simple pasta dish. Little did he know, his troubles were far from over. When Sir arrived with their food, she placed several extra dishes in front of Belle, much to his dismay. I didn't order these, he protested, feeling a knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. Before he could utter another word, the imposing figure of the boss lady loomed over them, her presence intimidating. Is there a problem here? She demanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. Bell felt himself shrink under her formidable glare, feeling utterly defenseless. However, before he could muster a response, Peter jumped in with his trademark humor. "No problem, big scary lady," he quipped, "Bell loves paying for food he didn't order for." Bell shot him a glare of pure betrayal, wondering how he had gotten himself into this mess. Bell couldn't shake the memory of Peter's unusual saying, "It's your funeral," echoing in his mind. In that moment, its meaning became perfectly clear to him. As they delved into the mouthwatering spread, Bell couldn't help but marvel at the culinary delights before them. Each dish was a masterpiece, tantalizing his taste buds with bursts of flavor. Despite the looming specter of an astronomical bill, Bell found himself thoroughly enjoying the evening, especially in the company of his eccentric familia member, Peter. With every passing moment, Peter's antics infused the dining experience with an extra dose of amusement. Whether he was cracking jokes or experimenting with bizarre food combinations, he kept the atmosphere light and entertaining. Amidst their meal, Mia Grand, the imposing woman, approached their table to inquire about their satisfaction with the food. Both Peter and Bell expressed hearty appreciation for the various delicacies. Pleased with their response, she smiled in satisfaction and introduced herself as Mia Grand. Engaging them in some friendly small talk, she added a personal touch to their dining experience. Suddenly, an announcement from Sir near the entrance interrupted the jovial atmosphere. "The big reservation is here. Now seating Loki Familia." The news spread like wildfire, igniting murmurs and whispers throughout the bar. "That's the giant slayer Familia. Aren't those all their top members? Which one is the legendary sword princess?" The words buzzed with a mixture of awe and fear, creating an electric tension in the air. Amidst the excitement, many couldn't help but whistle in admiration as they caught sight of Wallenstein and the other female members of the Loki Familia. Bell craned his neck to catch a glimpse of his crush, Ice Wallenstein. Flustered, he pondered whether he should approach her, perhaps to thank her or apologize for running away from her yesterday. Maybe, just maybe, he should even profess his undying love for her. Meanwhile, Peter's mind was reeling at the mention of the name Loki. Loki, here too, the very same villain who had wrought havoc in New York City a decade ago. Though he had been much younger then, Peter's memories of the devastation caused by Loki's attack were crystal clear. He didn't directly know anyone who had died during the invasion, but the impact had been profound nonetheless. Many relatives of his friends and classmates had been injured or killed, leaving scars that ran deep in the community. If not for the timely intervention of the Avengers, New York might have been reduced to rubble, and the world left vulnerable to the Chitauri invasion. Peter's gaze flickered towards the entrance, where a group of adventurers were entering. However, Loki was nowhere to be seen among them. Despite never meeting Loki in person, Peter had seen countless images of the infamous villain. He remembered hearing that Loki had met his demise at the hands of Thanos, and a small part of him couldn't help but feel that he got what he deserved. Turning to Bell, Peter sought clarification, his tone tinged with disbelief. "Loki, as in Thor's brother Loki?" A woman suddenly rushed up to him, clearly she had overheard his question. She had light red hair and red eyes, and her outfit was decidedly tomboyish, mainly jeans and a shirt that showed off her stomach. She tied her hair back in a simple ponytail. "What do you mean by Thor's brother? Just because I have small breasts doesn't mean you refer to me as a male," she exclaimed. Peter, caught off guard, blurted out unconsciously, "You're Loki." "Goddess Loki to you," she retorted, her tone sharp. Peter's mind was still trying to catch up that this world's Loki was completely different from the villain he knew. Stupidly asked, "You're a woman?" Loki lost it at that point. "What do you mean by am I a woman? Is breast size everything to men like you?" she shouted, seizing Peter by his collars. Two women, an elf and a human girl with dark complexion and revealing clothes, hurriedly pulled her back and restrained her. Amidst the chaos, a young boy stepped forward and apologized to Peter. "I apologize, our goddess has a slight, inferiority complex when it comes to her assets." Peter nodded, trying to diffuse the tension. "It's okay, kid, no problem," but suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as everyone's attention turned Peter. They stared at him as if he had grown another head. The girl with the dark complexion, who had been holding Loki back moments ago, stepped up to Peter, her expression fierce. "How dare you call the captain a kid? Apologize to him right now." Peter blinked, utterly bewildered by the sudden turn of events. The kid, who seemed to be the captain, attempted to defuse the situation. "Leave him, Tion," he ordered calmly. He must be new to Orario. Let's continue our celebration. With that, he led the way to their table, and the others obediently followed suit. Despite Loki still fuming, she was dragged away by the tall, beautiful-looking elf. Peter couldn't help but marvel at the amount of authority the seemingly young kid wielded. That's Finn Damnchi, the braver, the captain of the Loki Familia, the Mia declared from behind the counter. He is level 6, one of the strongest adventurers in Orario. Peter couldn't hide his surprise. Why is such a small child a captain? He blurted out, earning incredulous glances from both Belle and Mia. Belle took a moment to explain, he's not a child, he's an adult. He's a Palom. They just happen to look like children. Peter nodded, suddenly making a connection. Ah, so they're basically hobbits, he suggested, expecting recognition. However, both Belle and Mia looked thoroughly perplexed. Hobbit, Belle muttered, clearly confused. Peter waved it off with a chuckle. Never mind. Mia's serious expression caught Peter's attention as she addressed him. You've offended the goddess and the captain of one of the most powerful familia in the world. You should apologize, she advised sternly. Belle, sensing the weight of the situation, looked apprehensive. Peter nodded earnestly. I'll do it right away. How should I apologize? Should I bow down or something? I'm new to Orario, unaware of the customs here, he admitted. Mia looked at him with a hint of confusion before replying, bowing down while you say you're sorry is a standard custom in most places. She raised an eyebrow at him, indicating the simplicity of the gesture. Taking Mia's advice to heart, Peter stood up from his seat and proceeded towards the table occupied by the Loki Familia. He reasoned it was wise not to provoke individuals of such formidable stature. As he neared, the chatter at the table ceased, and he was met with a mixture of confused and disapproving looks. The goddess, her eyes narrowed almost to slits, appeared to be shooting daggers at him. Across the table, a man with wolf ears, dressed rather provocatively, cast a scowl in his direction. Peter couldn't help but muse to himself that the wolf man looked like he belonged more on a stage as a male stripper than in a tavern. Beside him, a blonde woman with captivating gold eyes regarded him with a distant, almost vacant gaze. Peter bowed respectfully to the goddess before speaking. I apologize sincerely, I meant no disrespect, it was simply a misunderstanding on my part. In my homeland, tales of Thor are widespread, and I had heard he is your brother. I mistakenly assumed you were male, he explained. Loki's squinting red eyes widened in surprise as she asked, where exactly are you from? Peter hesitated momentarily before replying, I'm from an island called Long Island. It's very far from here. Knowing he was conversing with walking lie detector, Peter aimed to keep his answers concise. Turning to Finn, Peter bowed once again. I apologize, sir, for referring to you as a kid. I am new to Orario, and I haven't encountered many Paloms yet. Finn regarded him with a piercing gaze before nodding. Apology accepted. I've been mistaken for a child before, but not since I became a first-class adventurer, he remarked. Well, I'll leave you to your celebrations then. Apologies again for my naivety, Peter said, offering a sheepish smile before turning to leave. Loki, her eyes squinting so much they looked closed, halted him with a probing question. So, you didn't mistake me for a man just because I have small boobs, right? Caught off guard, Peter stumbled over his words. Oh, no, goddess. I mean, of course not. You're very beautiful, and, size isn't everything, you know. Loki's smirk widened slightly, realizing that up until now, the young man had been quite truthful. However, the first lie she detected from him was his claim of indifference toward breast size. Well, she wasn't particularly surprised there. Still, she had to give him credit for being honest about finding her beautiful. Compliments about her appearance were a rarity, after all. As Peter stood there, a girl suddenly appeared before him. She had a dark complexion and was scantily dressed, bearing a striking resemblance to the one who had confronted him earlier about their captain. With hopeful eyes, she asked, You really mean that? Size isn't everything. Peter's mind froze, his heart doing a sudden somersault as the girl invaded his personal space. At arm's length away, Peter's mind clicked with a sense of déjà vu at the sight of her facial features. While Peter had spent his days in Orario absorbing the overwhelming information of a new world, a new way of life, and new friends, his subconsciousness was still grappling with stages of grief. In a moment of hopeful confusion, his mind played tricks, associating the new face with memories of his former girlfriend. The uncanny resemblance between the girl's features and those of his past love fueled this unexpected connection. As Peter's subconsciousness insisted that his girlfriend hadn't been lost but was standing right in front of him, he tried to rationalize his feelings, questioning if this girl could be a multiverse alternate version of MJ or if fate was simply playing tricks on him. But the moment was fleeting, interrupted by the reminder that the girl was still waiting for an answer. Peter couldn't help but notice her flat chest, reminiscent of Loki's. He was still in shock, but managed to gather himself enough to reply, "Yes, I really mean it. Size isn't everything. You're very beautiful, miss." Blushing at his compliment, she introduced herself as Tiona. Tiona Hiryut. Before Peter could fully process her name, another girl appeared beside her, leaving him wondering just how fast these girls could move. This one bore a remarkable resemblance to Tiona, and Peter recognized her as the same one who had confronted him earlier. "Size isn't everything, huh?" she remarked, puffing out her chest and causing her ample assets to strain against her bikini top. "Tell me, who's prettier, me or Tiona?" Peter couldn't help but wonder how on earth he ended up in such a bizarre situation. As Peter observed Tiona's expression fall at the other girl's question, he couldn't help but notice the smug smile on the other girl's face, as if she already knew he would choose her as the prettier one. Turning his gaze back to Tiona, he saw how her cheerfulness from just a moment ago had vanished, replaced by a hint of insecurity about her figure. It dawned on him that this world probably didn't have breast pads or similar solutions, which might exacerbate Tiona's feelings of inferiority. Oddly enough, even though Tiona looked remarkably like MJ, from her facial features to her figure, she also reminded him of his previous girlfriend, Liz, with her mix of confidence and vulnerability. He felt a lump rise in his throat, fighting to hold back tears at the memories this girl's mere presence was awakening. Clearing his throat, he addressed both girls, "Both of you ladies are very pretty, but I would say Tiona is prettier." A chorus of surprised, "Huh,"s echoed around the table, including from Tiona herself, who seemed taken aback by his unexpected choice. The blonde woman seated at the table, however, remained silent with the same blank expression as before. Loki couldn't hide her genuine surprise at the boy's response. He truly believed that Tiona was prettier than Tion. Perhaps there was some truth to his statement about not caring about size after all. Tiona beamed with gratitude. "Thank you for the compliment, Mr. Peter Parker," he replied, offering his hand. She shook it enthusiastically. "Would you like to join us?" she asked, her smile widening. Before Peter could respond, the wolf man sneered. "Oi, Tiona, this is a familia celebration dinner, not a place for you to date. If you want to take that weakling out to dinner, do it some other time." Tiona's blush deepened at the remark, but she quickly composed herself, shooting a defiant glance at the wolf man. Peter felt an urge to extend an invitation. "Would you like to go out with me for dinner?" Tiona's face lit up. "Yes, I would love to." But before Peter could bask in the success of his invitation, the girl who looked like Tiona delivered a swift karate chop to her head. "Tiona, have you completely forgotten your Amazonian pride?" she scolded. Then, she turned to Peter with a sneer. "You must defeat an Amazon in single combat to win her heart." Her gaze shifted to Finn, her expression turning wistful as she finished her statement. Amazons, Peter thought, eyeing both dark-complexioned girls. He noticed they were barefoot, which struck him as unusual. In his world, Amazons were mythical beings, but here they seemed human. Tiona's expression fell once more as she interjected, "Tion, we're not in Telskyrra anymore. Such stupid traditions don't apply here." Tion retorted, "Why, are you afraid that no man will be able to defeat you? Or maybe you are more worried that no one will be willing to make the effort. Seriously, who would want to go through the trouble of wooing a plank-chested twig like you?" Her words cut through the air with razor-sharp precision, leaving behind a palpable tension. Peter, discerning the twins' shared features and names, inferred their twinship. As Tiona visibly deflated under her sister's brutal critique, Peter couldn't help but empathize with her struggle. It was evident that Tiona bore the burden of her sister's relentless mockery, compounded by her own insecurities. Peter contemplated the strange tradition of men having to best the Amazons in combat to earn their affections. In this mystical realm, perhaps such customs were simply part of the fabric of this world's logic. Clearly, it held significance for Tiona. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Peter felt a sudden determination swell within him. "I'll do it," he declared. A stunned silence settled over the bar. Tiona and Tion echoed in unison, their disbelief mirroring each other's expressions. With unwavering resolve, Peter turned to Tiona. Tiona, I challenge you to single combat. And this is the end of part 4 of this amazing crossover. What if? Do not forget to leave a comment down below.